Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, CISA has completed its election security review, but it won't make the results public. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth issues a new directive on DOD software acquisition. It's Monday, March 10th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's dive into the day's top headlines. When the Trump administration began sidelining and laying off personnel at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, it started by targeting employees who worked on election security and disinformation. And at the same time, the Department of Homeland Security announced it would conduct a comprehensive review of CISA's election security mission. Last week, the agency confirmed that it has completed that review, but said that its findings won't be released to the public. A spokesperson for the agency said, quote, "The assessment that CISA has undertaken is internal and will help inform how the agency moves forward to best support critical infrastructure," adding that the resulting document is not planned to be released publicly. A DHS spokesperson told Cyberscoop in an email that the department had nothing else to share. Critics argue that withholding the review and its conclusions creates broad uncertainty among election security stakeholders and jeopardizes the collaboration between the federal government, states, and local governments, which rely on CISA's resources and technical expertise. In other news, Secretary Pete Hegseth is directing all Defense Department components to embrace a rapid software acquisition pathway and use commercial solutions openings and other transaction authority to speed up the procurement of digital tools for warfighters. The department's software acquisition pathway was set up during the first Trump administration under then Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, Ellen Lord, as part of a broader push for a so-called adaptive acquisition framework that enables the department to procure software differently than it buys hardware. Programs on that pathway are not subject to some of the encumbrances associated with the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System and Major Defense Acquisition Program designations. Now, Hegseth wants to make sure that all DOD components are taking advantage of the pathway. He wrote in a March 6 memo addressed to senior leaders, combatant commanders, and agency and field activity directors that the DOD has struggled to reframe its acquisition process from a hardware-centric to a software-centric approach, and it comes at the cost of the warfighter. To address the problem, Hegseth is decreeing that all DOD components must adopt the software acquisition pathway as the, quote, preferred pathway for all software development components of business and weapon system programs. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. The Daily Scoop podcast is available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back next week with brand new episodes. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.